Why don't we just take a minute to pray? I'll pray. Lord, we give you thanks for this group. Thank you for your presence with us. Thank you for your sovereignty over technology. And we do ask for your grace, that everything will work properly. For those who aren't yet with us, that they will be able to connect soon. Pray for Pamela's sound problems. That you will guide our time, that technically we'll be able to engage well with one another. And we ask that you will be the center of this time, that you will speak to us and guide us during this time. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. Why don't we take a minute and have you all just introduce yourselves. I'm going to go in the order that you appear on my screen. Congorzul, could you unmute and introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Congorzul. I'm serving in Mongolia with Campus Crusade here in LDH.
Okay, and Sylvia.
Hi, I'm Sylvia. I am in Singapore on the LDHR team, Special Projects.
Okay, let's switch over to your boss, Chi.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Chi. I'm serving in Singapore together with Sylvia and Joyce and Pamela. In addition to this, I'm also the area LDHR for East Asia Oriental. Very excited for this summer school.
So Taiwan, who is here, and Mongolia, who are here, are under his leadership as well. Joyce.
Hi, my name is Joyce. She is my boss. I just joined the LDHR team, I think about 2 years ago. I also divide my time with Korea CCC. I help them do some special projects. Yeah.
Thank you. Mike, you're next.
I'm Mike. I live in Budapest, Hungary, and serve on the Central and Eastern European area LDHR team.
Great. Welcome, Mike. You got two of your countries represented here as well.
Yes, I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Paul, you're next on my screen.
That'll be me then. I'm Paul Cheeseman. I'm living in the UK and working in the US, which makes for quite a commute in the mornings. I'm part of the global LDHR team, but we're a scattered team all the way from California over to the UK. That's me.
Great. Sunette, you're next.
Hi everyone, my name is Sunette. I live in South Africa and I've been part of the LDHR team for about a year now, taking over member care.
Fantastic. Thanks. Lisette?
Hi everyone, I'm Lisette. I'm the LDHR National Director in Santiago, Chile, well in Chile. I'm from Mexico, my husband is from the States and he's the National Director here. We're leading a small team, but as we are growing in associates and volunteers, we're very interested to get to know how to take care of them when we have a few people, but a lot of work. So I'm very looking forward for what we can share here and learn from each other.
Great. You're our only Latin American representative.
Yeah.
As Sunette is our only African representative. Yay. Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm drinking tea out of my Florida Starbucks mug. We were in Orlando for 5 years and just recently moved back. So in transition, yeah, I don't really have a job title at the moment. Paul invited me to this and I signed up, honestly, not really knowing what it was, but knowing Paul, I was like, what's probably going to be useful? And then realized, oh, I've got myself into something. But I think it is going to be good. I am being tasked with leading a team of people to discuss member care in the UK. So that's me.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Chica. Appreciate that.
Yeah, go ahead, Annie.
I'm Annie Baczynski, and I was born, raised, and live in Hungary, Budapest. And I work with LDHR for about 4 years. My husband is also the national team leader for the country. We have about 50 staff.
Great. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you.
Lee Boy, go ahead and introduce yourself. Good.
Good morning from the Southeast Asia LDHR team. I'm based here in Manila.
Okay, Lee Boy is the team leader for Southeast Asia team. Anita.
Hi, I'm Anita from Taiwan. I have been on LDHR for about 6 years. Yeah.
Good. Welcome. Karen, you're next on my screen.
Okay, I'm Karen Hausman, and we work with East Asia Ministry, but we actually live in Thailand. So I have a very unspecified member care role. A couple years ago, I was leading a task force. We were trying to set up a member care system for China. So we did that for a year, and now we're moving forward. I'm not sure what my role is, but I'm just really thrilled that there's actually other people thinking about member care around the world. Because when we were doing this 2.5 years ago, and Dennis was coaching me, there really wasn't anything else. It felt like we were, other than the executive team that had been able to do this document and think through it, as far as on the ground, there wasn't much there. So I'm thrilled to hear what other places in the world are doing.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. We can have a lot of encouragement and cross-pollination here. Gina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Gina Butz. I'm on the global LDHR team in Orlando. I'm fairly new to the team. I'm the director of LEAF, Leadership Formation. So I heard about this on Monday from Karen, and since LEAF has some kind of dips its toes in member care, and that's just a member care is a passion of mine. So I asked Dennis if I could come and just be an observer for the times that I can make it. So yeah, I'm excited. I think it's an important thing for us to focus on in Crew.
Good, thank you. Una, good evening.
Hi everyone, I am Una from Mongolia, and I'm serving in student-led movement.
Okay, welcome. And Batsatek, you're next.
I am Batsik. This is my second year in the LDHR team. I'm in charge in the associate staff training.
Great, welcome. Also in Mongolia.
Yes, from Mongolia.
Okay. Mandy, our sole Canadian representative.
Hi. Good morning from the Pacific end. So, yeah, so my name is Mandy. I'm with Human Resources here, and yeah, I'm the HR manager, and I specifically oversee our staff and intern selection. But there are various parts of member care or staff care, we call it, that we look after as well. And so I primarily do support our HR director in lots of various decisions and policies, and hoping to do more with member care as well.
Great, thanks, Mandy. Walter, Pak Kansanim.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Walter in Pakistan. Yeah, actually, I'm supposed to take a LDHR role maybe next year, but now I'm not so much engaged in member care or something else. But anyway, I want to know learn more about the member care and all the things from you.
This will be great preparation for you.
Thank you.
Lillian from Taiwan.
Okay, I'm Lillian. I'm from Taiwan, and I currently live in Taiwan. I was serving in Japan for 3 years, and I just moved back this April, and I'm starting to serve with LDHR in June, so I'm pretty new. So I'm hoping to learn more about LDHR and member care things.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. Terry, you're next on my screen.
I'm Terry Morgan. I work with the global team, LDHR, also in Orlando. Spent a lot of years in Mexico before coming to Orlando. So nice to be with you all.
Hey, great. Sandy.
My name is Sandy. I live in the U.S. I have been working with U.S. LDHR staff care. My husband and I are transitioning to Western Europe to serve the area with staff care, member care. So.
Fantastic. It looks like everybody, people jumped around a little bit, your picture, so I might have missed somebody. Did I miss anybody? Raise your hand, jump up and down. Oh yeah, my wife here. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm the behind the scene person over here. I'm the other half of this man. I think I would
The better
use
half.
The better half. I usually say the better fourth because I'm a short person. Well, I look forward to hearing from each other, from each of you, and we're on the same team. Thank you.
Yay.
I will be back on my place.
So if you haven't done so yet, take a look at all of the great introductions on the global, the member care summer school Facebook community. And if you haven't posted yet, please do. I love your pictures, able to help us get to know each other that way as well. We'll get to know each other more as the sessions go on because we're going to break up into small groups during this time as well. So several brought up just the need for member care, and I think the response globally to this course has been very encouraging and reinforced the felt need for something that we do that's standard, that's effective in caring for our people. And so for the last over 2 years, our team has been looking at, focusing on member care. The Foundations of Member Care document that you read, I'm saying you read it, I'm by faith, that you read, was actually a work done by a global task force of member care professionals, practitioners, who put together that as a foundational philosophy, direction for member care for our movement. And in a little while, we'll discuss it a little bit more. Unfortunately, Campus Crusade, Crew, Power to Change, whatever is called in your country is Agape, whatever is called in your country is a very mission-minded organization. And we charge forward with the mission, but sometimes we leave our wounded laying on the battlefield. And so we have not done an exceptional job in the area of member care generally. So it's something that I feel we're just starting to learn. We're just starting to scratch the surface on, but it's something that's so important that we work more and more faithful stewards of the resources that God has given us in our people. So that's what hopefully our time together will do, and plant seeds actually globally for being able to trust God to develop environments of true care and development for our people, so that they'll know that they're known, they're needed, and that they have a future. And we'll talk more about that slogan that we have: known, needed, and have a future, and how that looks like. What we're going to be doing for our summer school, we've got 5 weeks together. It sounds like a long time, but it's going to go fast. We've got 5 weeks together. We're going to have some instruction time. I've asked you to read the articles and do some pre-work because I don't want to spend a lot of time reiterating the facts, the details. I want more time for discussion and interaction. So in a minute, we're going to break up into groups and have some discussion time. But for our time today, we're going to be looking at the foundations. We're going to look at the foundation of member care. We're going to look at our framework, the diagram, and explain the different components of member care that we want to focus on, and then have some application. for that. And that's basically the direction for our day. Any question? Everybody's tracking with me, right? Smile if you're tracking. Good. Good. You never know how international connections are going to go, so praise the Lord. What I want to try to do, we have a capacity with Zoom to break up into groups. And I'm assuming, and not assuming, I know that all of you have read the Foundations of Member Care article. So I'd like you just to open that up on your other screen, other window. And we're going to discuss a little bit about that. I'm going to paste the discussion questions on the chat box. Paul has posted the link to the member care, and I'm posting now the questions that we're going to talk about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to manually put you in groups.
Let me just explain what's going to happen, because Dennis tried it out with us last week and I just thought it was magic. So at the press of Dennis's hand, we're going to subdivide into small groups. You won't need to do a thing. You will just suddenly find yourself in a little sub-meeting with 3 or 4 other people. And Dennis, again, at his whim, will bring us back together to the big group after we've had a chance to have a chat about things. But I have to say, there are many things technologically that seriously impressed me, but I just loved this when we did it last week.
We're going to be breaking up. Do you see the discussion questions there in the chat box? Okay, I'm going to break you up into groups, and then after 10 minutes, I'm going to bring you back. So that'll give you about 10 minutes to discuss. When we come back then, I'd like you just to share some of the things that you discussed, some of your impressions, some of the benefits you see from having a global standard of member care. Here you go. Have fun.
Oh, and Dennis is with us.
I'll be switching to different groups.
Oh, you can do that. That's so cool.
Yeah, awesome.
So, how did this document shape, change, support your view of member care? I'm kind of assuming we've all read it at least briefly. Any thoughts? Was it kind of new information, or was it stuff that you guys were used to, or are you reading it for the first time right now?
I know the first time I read over it, it put into words what I kind of have heard from a few different people of, reminding ourselves it happens best closest to the people. And I know my nature is to want to be the one giving the care, because a lot of us are in this because we're passionate about the people and love to see face to face how God's working their lives and being a part of caring for them. But just a reminder that, care is best done over the ongoing long-term relationships that are in their lives, and facilitating that is much more effective long-term. And that shaped me a lot.
Yeah, I agree. When I was first in kind of like a national LDHR role, I wanted to be that knight in shining armor that was sweeping in. There was kind of trouble. And actually, it took me a few crash and burns and a good few argument with ministry directors before I realized that I was actually treading on other people's toes, empowering team leaders on occasion. So, yeah, no, I'm with you, Mike.
Okay. So I felt like I had very little knowledge of what's going on. I'm sure that we are practicing elements of it, but it felt like, okay, I got, the corners of a big room, that at least I know where the corners are, and that from this on we have to feel it. So that's how I felt that we got some posts to measure ourselves to,
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add. This document wasn't new to me, so I agree with all of it, and I think it's great. I like how they've delineated out the way that we different care. I think where I'm at is I just have a lot of questions on how this practically is going to work out. And yeah, so when we get with the what questions are unclear, that's where I probably will have a lot of things to input. Yeah. I was just saying on question number 2, what did you find most helpful?
So it was interesting for me. I mean, not it's new, but it was interesting to be written down that the team leader is the primary actor for team care. I mean, it totally makes sense. Yeah, that's a very, I mean, it's a delicate thing because, you know, you just have to know how much your team leader is capable of. And yeah, I guess for me to read that was new. I mean, it seems obvious, but still, yeah.
Do you think, okay, so can I ask a question? Do you think that's actually happening in your area? Like, are team leaders taking on that responsibility?
But that's the thing that, you know, I don't think that, you know, they have that they have a bad intention not to care for their and shepherd their staff. It just feels that their responsibilities are so many that it doesn't come through that, or they just, that's the last thing that they can concentrate on, unless the house is burning, of course.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, I appreciate you sharing. Yeah, I think that's one of my questions is not necessarily unclear, but one of my concerns is at a team level, like a campus team level, that can work. You know, you have a tight-knit group of people. You've got a team leader who's probably interacting with these people on a daily basis. It's a lot easier to know how people are doing emotionally or spiritually. But once you move to a regional level and a national level, because we've been on the national team for years and years, I just don't see that happening very much at all. I feel like there's
more aware, but it's more like, how are we really encouraging our staff to pay more attention to self-care, that they feel they have the permission to do that. And another, Dennis isn't here, but another aspect that I really appreciated is in the sort of like the tagline of being known, needed, and have a future. I actually really appreciate have a future, because I don't know if many of our staff feel like they have a future, and they may simply be in ministry, of course, being tied to their calling, and that is what is an important motivator. But I think sometimes our staff can lose sight of that. I'm not really sure what that future looks like for them. So I'm glad that is actually a focus, that we want to make sure our staff know that there is a future.
What questions are still unanswered or unclear? Do you feel that in this document, the part you just mentioned, like, I feel like I have a future, is not addressed? I mean, it is mentioned here, but like how we make sure that the staff are feeling they have a future.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think somehow we can, I don't know, include that in this document in more detail, or how to? Because we do say, yes, we want our staff to be known, needed, and have a future. Mm. But then, like, what do we do to help them feel they have a future with Campus Crusade?
Yeah, and I think, I know it's not really outlined in this document, but maybe we would touch on that later as well. You know, for us in Canada, we've talked about succession planning for a very, very, very long time. We've talked about maybe having a mentoring program for a very, very long time. But what those practical things, like, you know, what does that look like logistically and practically? It's just never been really rolled out. So it'd be interesting to see how others have worked on it or have attempted.
I really agree with the brother from Korea that this diagram actually shows very clearly. We ourselves know, like, okay, the staff is the primary
person to care for them, and then the team, and after that the movement. Yet this diagram shows the staff very clearly how it should be, you know. So as the brother said, oftentimes maybe it's the Asian mentality such that the organization of my team has to care for me. When they think of LDH, the first question they ask is, what are you?
Especially, I think, in maybe also in Taiwan, that not all the leaders have this idea. Yeah, so how, I don't know how we're gonna do that, especially because in this article it doesn't say that how do we communicate with the leadership team to put that happen, to put that into something that, okay, we should start to do some member care. Yeah, so I think that was one of the is it question or something that I don't know how to solve.
Yeah. I think one question I had that I think similar, Lillian, is not maybe addressed, or I didn't see it in the article, is what are the qualities or competencies necessary for, oh, are we back?
No, I just joined your group.
Oh, okay. I was like, holy moly. Suddenly I saw the teacher. Okay. Yeah, one question I have after reading the article is, you know, and maybe it'll come up later, Dennis, but what are the competencies of someone who is doing member care at all, even at a team, you know, team care? What are the competencies or the qualities or the things that the equipping that needs to happen for a team leader to do team care? And then what are the qualities or competencies of someone who is doing doing that at a national level or an area level? It wasn't in this article, but it's one of the thoughts that came up is that, wow, if every team needs to be engaged at some level in member care, what is it that they need to, what are some basic things they need to learn to do or know to do? What about you, Batsiksik? Do you have any questions or things that are unclear from the article?
Not yet. Everything is new for me. It's enough information in here.
Yeah.
I try to catch up everything and understanding.
I think so, but I also think this is going to be your strength going forward. I think I went into member care because I burned out myself when I was ministering abroad. And I think what you're going through now is probably going to teach you a great deal of things that you can offer in member care. So even though right now you're very frustrated and hurt by that maybe, I just want to encourage you to keep going with this, because there's going to be other people along your way that you can really support through what you're going through now.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. I have a much better perspective having seen member care operate in a very different way, in a generally very healthy way, I would say. And then coming back with the resources are limited, but not as limited as probably other places. So.
You all are bringing up some really great and real questions. I think we'll get to more of that as the course goes on, and we look at each of the specific areas more. And you'll probably, as Sunit was saying, help to answer some of them yourselves as you use your own strengths and experiences. Even the hard times, unfortunately, sometimes they're some of our greatest strengths. Just what was missing for us sometimes, and get involved in helping provide it for somebody else. Una, I was wondering if you had anything to add. We haven't heard from you.
I'm sorry. The member care is quite new for me because I'm not in the LDHR team. I'm a staff of SLN team. So maybe first time I just want to hear from you guys and also learn about what is member care, and what is that kind of the framework, like a self-care, master care. So yeah, I just want to, yeah, this is very new for me.
Well, I think that's great, and I actually think you bring an excellent perspective because, as Anna was mentioning, and maybe Sunit also, the team side of it, which might be very different from which strategy you're involved in or not.
Tempted to want to go ahead and click ahead and look at that priority assessment tool, because a big part of what I feel like I need is how can I give an objective measurement of, no, this is how we know when we're in the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Is when we have these things going on.
Yeah. And you're right. Objectivity in this area is really, really hard to come by. We found this when we were doing the whole the 31 days thing, of people's understanding of what is enough rest is just really hard. And in all honesty, that there were people with. I remember having a long conversation with a certain vice president of our organization who was just saying, I just have high capacity. I can actually work at this pace. I've done so for 30, 40 years, and it's fine. And it's kind of difficult to argue with, but it's when that then sets the bar that everyone else feels that they need to live up to, that it gets a little bit tricky.
I'd love to keep talking about that. I'm afraid they're about to cut us off. That's a topic I would love to talk more about, because I have a very high capacity person in our environment as well. And they are not at all somebody who expects everybody to be like them.
Welcome back. So I'd like you to share some of the things you talked about. What are some of the things that you talked about related to the foundations article? You don't need to get into the diagram at the end. We'll talk about that next. But the first 2 pages of the foundations of member care, what are some of the ways that it helped shape your thinking about member care? What did you find helpful? What questions are maybe still unanswered? Let's save that till a little bit later. So what did you find helpful? How did it shape your views of member care?
So I am representing Walter Conkurzu. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it properly, and Joyce. And so, so a couple of things that we really appreciated, particularly in the tagline of "No Need Didn't Have a Future." We appreciate, or me specifically, I appreciated the part of having a future, because I hope that our staff see that their calling is of course one of their key motivators, but sometimes I think we can lose sight of that. And knowing that the organization wants to plan for our staff to have a future is really important, and I think that they would feel loved and cared for, knowing that there is a future with the organization. And so someone from our group really talked about how just simply if they were a new staff member and reading this document, they would feel loved and cared for. And I think that was a really good affirmation of just how how this document really is very thought through of how we globally have best practices and standards to care for our staff. And and so for all of us, this is our first time really reading and engaging with this content, and so it's been very helpful. And for particular for some of the people in my group as well, they feel like that they have content to take back to their leadership to really talk about what those global practices are, and really feel like that there's more for them to push on to care for our staff. And I think there was a point about self-care that was very interesting, of with the primary actor of self-care being the individual, and particularly some of the people in my group, was talking about how, yeah, our staff need to know that and need to feel the permission to take that time and act on it as well, but that they are taking that responsibility for their own self-care, and that it's not simply just waiting for the for your director or for your organization to pour into you. And that is, you know, of course, an important piece, but that responsibility for the person themselves is really important, and that they know that they need to do that. And so yeah, I think those were some of the key things that we talked about.
Thanks, Mandy. Anybody else? Either you can represent your whole group or you can share your own thoughts.
I think I shared that for me it was relieving to read the things that it's not an end by itself, and that it's like master care and self-care are the primarily things. So it gives me rest. Because the need could be overwhelming, and if you're just focusing on all these different situations that are happening, but it's when you have that focus and then you know how to improve in that direction and give the tools, but it's not a burden that you cannot bear. So that was my main what I take from it, that everything is good, but that's my blessing from it.
Thanks, Lisette.
I was literally Googling member care like 2 weeks ago because I was trying to find a definition of it, and most of the resources that I found were very much about sending missionaries, what you do to care for the missionary abroad, and how you care for the missionary that's returning from the field, which is obviously so important. But one of the things I really liked about this was it was about the member of staff that's in country, maybe has never been abroad, and so it's not tailored specifically to sending. It covers everybody that's in the organization. So being really new to understanding what member care is, I thought that was very helpful.
Good, thanks. Yeah, that first sentence, the description of member care as the ongoing organizational responsibility to support, equip, and empower ministry personnel for effective and sustainable life, relationships, ministry, and work, resulting in them experiencing that they're known, needed, and have a future. It's a good description and a target for us to work toward.
I'll jump in on behalf of the most of the boys. We spent a long time talking about the framework bit itself, but we did start off just by talking about culture and how, well, as we all know, you can put systems into place fairly quickly, but when you talk about a culture of care, that quite often feels like you're pushing uphill an awful long way before you actually get anywhere. And I think globally we do, because we have such a big mandate and such a big calling, that sense of pressure is quite a culture that you have to fight against to get rest and balance and wholeness as the topics of conversation rather than just the how busy we are. So yeah, we chatted about that for a bit.
Oh, I'm just really glad to hear you say that, because I feel like when we were trying to set up a member care system, one of our first things we did is to say, what do we really need? Like, what are we already doing, right? Because it's not like we don't care for our staff. We do. It's just all been done under a kind of an HR umbrella that look like, you know, the team leader's doing this, or we're training people in this, or we have these groups or whatever. So there's member care is a huge umbrella that holds a lot of things, and quite a few we're already doing, but where were our needs? And I think we kept bumping up against that. How do you change a culture? So I'm really glad that you're saying that, because I do think it's a slow process. And at least for the area of the world that we've served in, and for America, I do see we are drawn to people that are very highly motivated, go-getters, we go, 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 and yet sometimes we are not watching what's going on in our inward life, and we're still pushing and we're still persevering, and yet I think something is being lost in our relationship with the Lord, in our relationship with each other, and that work-rest balance. So as we did a survey to just trying to see where our staff was, we came up with some of the big things, and it was like, okay, we can make a plan, but the plan, it doesn't always work to say, here are the 5 steps and follow them and you'll be a healthy, spiritually healthy and emotionally healthy individual. But it's more of a culture. How do we have that change? So anyway, I'm agreeing with you and feeling like that is something that I'd love to see on a global level, that we do have more of a culture of care and not so product oriented, but maybe more process oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of that, Paul did bring up something that I thought was an extremely practical measure of the culture is, what do we hold each other accountable for? And that what we hold each other accountable for is very telling of the culture. Are we always only holding accountable for, are you working your hours? Are you meeting your numbers? Versus, are we asking people, are you taking your day with the Lord? Are you actually getting enough sleep? Are you having, regular quiet times? What are you doing that's feeding your soul? And that I think is one of the things that as soon as he said it, I was like, yes, that is something that we can shape the culture with, and that I think we can identify as telling us what the culture is. I mean, a part of it, not the whole thing, but a part of it.
I think a big part of changing the culture for us, we're busy doing that now. We had an LDHR meeting for year planning for next year, and the question was, how are we going to reach our goal of making multiplying disciples? And the answer to that was member care, because our staff are really struggling. And I think we have, maybe not just in my country, I think we have a culture of busyness that just, if you're not busy, it's weird. And I think we started changing that culture by doing just trainings, because self-care, is the responsibility of each of us. But our staff doesn't even know what self-care is. They don't even know what burnout is. They don't know. They've never heard of it. So education, I think, educating them with what it means and what, for them as well, understanding what member care means and what the protocols are when I have a problem. Who do I go to and who do I report it to and where do I get help and that kind of stuff. That's already kind of creating a culture. Something simple like once a week I post a member care tip, a self-care tip on our staff group, and everybody can see it. And it's called Member Care Minute, and it's really short, but they are learning skills to just do self-care because they don't know what it is. So I think for us, the first starting point for changing that culture is just educating them with what does it mean to be healthy in the first place.
That's great, Sunette. Maybe you could post those on our LDHR site also, Facebook.
Okay, I can try.
No, really, we can learn from each other and encourage one another. This is great.
Yeah, that would be great.
Share resources. That would be great.
Yeah.
Suggestions to also upload any resources you have there. Sunette asked a great question in our group about whether there's any job descriptions out there for people who are doing the role of member care on a team. And Karen mentioned she has one, and but if anybody else has one too, the question is there in the chat. But if you could upload any resources like that into the Facebook community so that everybody could see them, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I did a quick search after that as we've been talking, and I think what I'll upload is several things, because I feel like our perspective is going to grow as we also see what other organizations are doing. Of course, we will manipulate it and change it to fit us, right? And even not us as the whole world, but us as in our particular countries and, you know, our particular ministries. But so I have a couple job descriptions that are from different organizations, and then I'll have to go and find the one that we had for East Asia. And it looked different we were trying to set up, we still have a national director position open that's not been filled, and then like what it would look like as a regional care. So when you look at those, I'll try to delineate. But I've learned a lot, and Chiang Mai is like member care mecca, because for Southeast Asia, a lot of organizations, and that's where I started going, oh my gosh, you mean you do that? You know, like I'd have conversations and I'd be like, wow, we don't offer any of that. You're able to support your people that way. So I just started asking questions like, so what do we do in member care? You know, what, do we have a system? Do we, in it, I came to find out, oh, no, we don't. So even that, I think we can just learn from some of the other organizations and what they've done, and then how we tweak it to help us.
Well, I think one of the freeing things that somebody did bring up is that LDHR's role is not to provide all the care that our staff will ever receive in their lives. So that kind of frees us up. But in another sense, we are perhaps to have to play the role of the member care culture champions. One group was talking about just how the document brings up that the primary responsibility for care on the team is the team leader. Are our team leaders equipped for that? Do they understand that role? And how do we as LDHR come along and help resource them?
That's a good question, Dennis, because when I look at our team leader training, the materials on the website, I think we can do better if we add more sections on team care.
I just lost your last couple words. If we had more what?
More time empowering them on team care, equipping them on.
Good. What are some questions that are still unanswered after reading the Foundation's document?
Well, we had talked about the future part, and it was unclear to us, at least through this document, what that looks like for us as global practices and as an organization.
The staff know needed and have a future, have a future part?
Yeah, what does having a future actually mean? And all the practical things that we've been doing as an organization.
Yeah. Any other questions that you still have related to the foundations?
For me, will be the balance between all this. We're a small team, so I find that because we're small, we're able to take care of all these issues because we're all connected as a community, even though we have a lot to do. But then when you are looking at, okay, we're gonna make some efforts to have development and the knowledge of the Bible, development on your personal interest, development in all these areas, and it's okay, and then you need time for every one of them, but you also have all these work assignments, and it's okay, how do you balance all that? Like you focus on one by seasons, or what do we do? So it's actually, you get to touch all these areas and you have a improvement as a whole, but it's not like a syncretism of like taking care of me when we are all sold out for doing what he wants, what God wants, right? So I think the balance is what, for me, it's okay, how do we balance all this to be faithful to what God has called us to do? Well, we do take care of us, well, we love others, we love him, so that's my main question about it.
Yeah, that's a huge question. Some of the resources that we'll see in the following sessions may help with that, but yeah, that's huge. Where's the balance?
Yeah, and one thing I'll add, I just think that I have a lot of questions on the practical outworking and what this is going to look like. But one of the things is, it feels like there's a difference between HR and member care. In HR, a lot of concern about the policies. We're doing placement, we're doing training. Do you know what I mean? Like skills and I don't know. And yet member care feels like more of what's at the heart, what's going on inside, what's going on with your family, how are your children doing? Does somebody have deep emotional needs? What those kind of things, or how's your extended family? For us and our national staff, it's like, how are your parents doing? Because that weighs heavily, on how the staff are doing. They have elderly parents or whatever. So there's part of my questions like, how can we almost separate out sometimes? Because I don't think that LDHR, just not sure we can put anything more on some of these people. They've got so much going on. And it's almost hard to wear both hats at once. If you're the person who can fire or hire someone, that's not maybe going to be the safe environment that somebody needs who's having a struggle in their marriage and they need to come and talk to someone. Do you know what I mean? So some of my questions are, what can this look like as we try to maybe make some distance? Although it doesn't mean the team leader isn't concerned. So we're still putting, it doesn't mean they walk off, yet there's something special that can happen within member care that can provide some things that LDHR doesn't do normally, if that makes sense.
Member care certainly is a very important part of our LDHR framework, which includes strategy, development, processes, and care. How do we provide an environment? And some of you here are LDHR generalists who are responsible for the whole gamut of the LDHR responsibilities. There are some here who are specialists, member care specialists. And so talk about how in our countries that are understaffed anyway, how we can have somebody that's focused on the care aspect. It's a huge challenge. Other questions that are still unanswered? I cannot promise that all your questions will be answered in this course, but the hope is that as we engage in our discussions, as we look through the resources, as we go through the course material, that at least there will be some light at the end of the tunnel that's not an oncoming train that will help us, equip us to provide the environment of care that everybody needs to be able to care for themselves, for their teams, and also the movement. Going to go into the next topic unless there are questions. The other thing that we wanted to do today is take a look at our framework, the framework that we have for member care. And if you go ahead and go to session 1, in session 1 we have the member care framework described maybe a little bit more clearly than the Foundation's document. So if you go to session 1, you can link that. Paul, could you put the link on the chat? Let's just take a few minutes to look over and review this diagram. Those of you who have been involved in member care in the past, your first thing that you will notice is that the diagram we're using is different than the former diagram that we had. If you remember the concentric circles diagram that we had, which was nice, it was good, it came out of the Doing Member Care Well book. But we have a brand shiny new, spiffy, cool looking, easily understandable diagram that hopefully will help us to communicate member care in a more understandable way. What do you think about the new diagram? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Good. I'm glad you like it. In this diagram, we see master care in the center, that our relationship with God is the key. that God is the center of all the care that we receive and are able to give to others. And then self-care at the top of the endless knot, being able to take that responsibility to care for self. And then the team care and movement care, and all of these work together, interact in a seamless process, theoretically. That's what we're aiming for. What are your thoughts? I want to let me just post a couple of questions. That first of all, what do you feel the diagram clearly communicates our framework, and in what ways? Let's start with that.
Well, it was getting a lot of love in our group, I have to say. So I'm going to pick on Mike. Mike, do you want to speak to it?
Thanks, Paul.
Well, I definitely liked that the other one gave the impression that maybe member care or master care not connected to other circles, instead of it being, you know, a key part of all of them. And I like the sense that it kind of has a little bit of the three-dimensional element. One question I have that I wonder about is if it's intentional that they kind of seem to make arrows where there's, you know, like movement care is in pointing one way, master pointing one way, and all of this. If it's meant to indicate something directional, that, you know, the master care influences team care, influences self-care, movement care. And I wondered if having a short explanation to what it represents would be helpful.
Yeah, there is no intentional direction there. We're trying to simulate an endless knot where everything flows together and works together. Thanks, Mike. Any other thoughts? One of the first pushbacks we got on this diagram is that, for example, the other diagram clearly had specialist care and networking care in the outer circles, and this one does not indicate those at all. Those in our member care framework, we distinguish that those are primarily done by LDHR, and so specialist care, networking care are very important, and they're part of the movement care. Another thing, I guess, that was pushback is some people felt the diagram did not say everything about member care, and that's true. Any diagram will be limited. So it is limited in how it communicates, but it's designed as a tool to help you communicate the foundations, the framework for member care with your team and your people.
I want to add what Paul and Mike they add on about concerning about the framework. I like the way that it has been presented. Three distinct color, yet they are connected. It's not a standalone. They are not silo. They imply the importance of that there's role for each component, yet at the same time they are supposed to work together. So I think that it stresses that that we need each other. And I like the document stresses each role has an important function. Like the self-care, I like the word that has been used. The key word that I kind of take away is that, you know, it own the responsibility to take care of themselves. I think I like the way that has been described. I think there is a role that we need to take care of ourselves. When I'm tired, I do need to rest. I need to, and it's my responsibility to make time to rest. You know, and so there is. I think that is one. And I like the word team care, which Paul stresses just now. The word accountability. I think the word accountability in the team care is the team leader hold each other accountable, not just for the results, but also for their welfare. And I think team members also keep a lookout for each other. You know, hey, you know, you have been working too hard, or hey, you know, you have been not been catching up with this. So I think there's this word to me that is stand out very strong. And the third word that struck me in the movement care is the word that is foster a culture. I think that's very important, which I think we stresses the importance of that promoting that culture, which if the culture is not there, then everything that we try to do will work against us. So I think the movement care plays an important role. I like the way that it's been mentioned. It's responsible to foster a culture. So I think encourages and promotes. So I like the way that has been put it very clearly. Define the role. Yet at the same time, it stresses that they all need to work together. Nobody is to work alone by themselves, and I like it the way that's been put across. That's all that I want to say.
Thanks, Chi. I'd like to just talk about question number 3. I've also posted in the chat. Well, how could you use this diagram to explain the member care framework to others? Do you feel this would be a good tool for you to use to explain the responsibility for self-care, the focus of master, the need for team accountability? Why don't you go ahead and share some thoughts on how you think you can use this to help communicate our framework for member care?
I think first, I really like it very much because it communicates to everyone who sees this diagram. And actually the explanation paragraphs also should accompany the diagram. It gives a very clear explanation of who's responsible for what and at what level. And so my first thing probably I would like you to take away from tonight's session is share this, translate it into Mongolian and share it with our staff people, our team leaders, and our leadership team. Just repeating what Chi said, it does have very good phrases, verbs, and nouns like foster culture, the primary actors, the team leader, accountable, all these things. Like for instance, this sentence, the best systems of care can never replace a member's personal reliance on Christ. So there's it has very good language, very precise, very accurate language, and gives very clear, communicates very clearly when it comes to staff care, member care, who is responsible for how much.
I also really like the diagram. This is the first one, so I cannot compare to anything. I had no idea what member care is, so this helps a lot. But also, I guess back to the second question, still I was thinking, and we don't have to elaborate on this, but it really makes, it's difficult to know, again, the responsibilities. Where does team care ends and where does movement care comes in? How do we relate? How do we make sure that we don't, it's not falling through the cracks, we were expecting. So I guess I don't know how we can connect well.
That's where the art comes in. We have art and science. The framework is more of a science. This is what member care framework is. But then when you start putting the meat on the bones, you start putting the building together, that's where the art comes in. So those of us in member care, those of us in LDHR, really need to be sensitive to God's leading in some of those balances, some of the way those things work together. And it's fun. The Lord is a great artist. And I think he's able to bring things together in a way that we may not be able to.
Can I just jump in on that one quickly, Dennis?
You betcha.
For me, I kind of learned this the hard way when I was first in HR, because I kind of thought my role was jumping in with like the knight in shining armor to sort out all the member care problems, and it took me running into a few crises before I realised my role in LDHR was to support team leaders, and I think that when that piece is in place, a lot of the other pieces start to fall into place from there. So the role of kind of like movement care in terms of LDHR's piece is ensuring the team leaders are well supported, and that connection is so the team leaders know who to flag it with when they feel like things are starting to get out of their control, or there's a specific intervention that they need. So it doesn't answer all the questions, but for me that was a big switch that I had to make in the first few years of my primary role is not in supporting the staff members, it's supporting the team leaders.
So I really appreciate the comment, and I'm eager to learn what this actually means and how do you go about that, what the practicality of that. So I'm all in to hear.
Dennis, just had a thought with your the third question. I think even just in relating, thinking about coaching, like the leaders that I coach, I think oftentimes, I like this diagram because I feel like it reminds me of that there are several categories to think through. And sometimes a staff will come to me with an issue, and it's their kind of their complaint is like the organization's not caring for me, and that like that might be true, and that's important to address. And yet, how do we how's your relationship with the Lord? How's your self-care? Like, it's kind of balancing out that it's not all on one person or on one, it's not all on the organization. And yet from the other side to say, okay, but you can't expect everyone to they'll just take care of themselves, and so I think I really like having that picture. And I feel like it's just in using that diagram, even thinking through like, okay, well, let's talk about what you can control. And, you can control how you're related to the Lord, and you can control the choices you're making about caring for yourself. So I like that just on a personal level.
Yeah. One of our supplemental resources in session 1 is a staff member care card that actually can be printed back and forth, front and back, on kind of a card form. And I used it, our LDHR team can use that to help communicate each of these important parts of member care, the responsibilities. That's one thing that you can take a look at, tweak for your own use, and perhaps will help you communicate with others as well.
I'm just thinking that how important this would be to give to new staff and new staff training, because then their expectations are set. You've got lots of people who've been on staff for many, many years, and their expectations perhaps need to be reset, and that's one job. But if you can do it from the ground up, your culture is then being cultivated right where you want it to be cultivated. I'm looking at the context that I'm in right now, and I think we're doing okay at some of these things, but then I've been out of the picture for some time, so I need to relearn it, and I'm only looking at it through my lens, not other people's lenses. But I know that if I had had this as a new staff member, I would know what to expect, and then I wouldn't be talking about them so much, because who are we talking about when we talk about them anyway? Like, we all are them. And that's one of the things that I've come across quite a lot. You can talk about they this and they that, and I mean, who are they talking? Who are they? Who are those people? We're all part of the organization. But maybe there would be less disappointment if this was really clear in everybody's minds.
I would like to add to what Paul was also saying, and I think what Anna is struggling with. In our organization, we developed a thing called care questionnaire, because the team leaders are already kind of overloaded. So when you give them another task and more trainings, they're just gonna feel even more overwhelmed. So what we did is we developed a questionnaire that measures the wellness of the staff's how well they are doing body, soul, and spirit. And we sent those out, and they had to take the results of that questionnaire and put it into 3 categories. So the one works like a traffic light, green, orange, and red. And if you're really not doing well in one with whatever, then you put it in the red category. If you're not doing so well and you need to work on something, orange. And if you're doing really great, red. Green, sorry. So only if you have a lot of stuff happening in the red category, then you immediately initiate a conversation with your team leader. And in collaboration with member care, we handle that, and we support the team leader, give them resources, arrange counseling for them. But this is actually used in collaboration with the PF conversation. So that's a support document to the PF conversation, which means all the staff have that PF conversation 3 times a year with their team leader, and they are held accountable on self-care, on things that they should be working on that are in the red category for both body, soul, and spirit. So in general, that's creating a great awareness for people, for all the staff, and it's creating an accountability structure for them.
That's great. If you notice our LDHR framework, the care quadrant, the position-focused conversations actually fall more under there than they do under development, the care process. Well, we better move on. If you have any questions at all, we can continue to use our Facebook community to post questions. So we're going to try some groups now. The discussion questions are in your notes, but let me go ahead and post them here as well. These are just general discussion questions about application of what we've learned today. I'll put you in groups, and we've got about 10 minutes to discuss these questions. So there are 2 questions based on our member care framework. What aspects of member care would you consider as strengths in your country or region? Why? And what aspects of member care would you consider weaknesses that need to be developed? Why, and what can you do to develop them better? There's only 10 minutes, so we're not going to be able to discuss everything, but enjoy your discussion. Any questions before we break up?
Dennis, is Pamela in the group?
Pamela, hi, I see you're here, Pamela. Are you with us? Wave.
Pamela, can you wave?
Yeah, okay. So Pamela, you are assigned to a group, so hopefully you'll be able to get in this time. Okay. Okay, I'm going to break you up into groups now. 10 minutes, we'll come back.
I think one of my observation is the team care that needs to be strengthened. I think Leroy, you mentioned that new team leaders training. I think that's one aspect that is not, I think, can be strengthened. Again, I also understand team care. I mean, caring is really is the art and science of it. So every team leader knows that they are supposed to care. I think the art part is that how do they care while in the middle where they have a task, where we have a task to go. So I think that's where some of the challenge that our team leaders are facing. And also, that's one comment. Second comment is that not everybody has the luxury of a team they work with. You know, if you're coming from a smaller country or a smaller ministry, your team is either you yourself or you 1 or 2 person. So I guess that's just a challenge about, and if a team members will move year to year, then the team care tends to be very choppy. So I think that's the challenge that I observe. Yeah.
I don't want to come across as pessimistic, but I'm struggling to name a strength in our area. not because, I mean, there is growth, but I don't think we have any one area quite to a satisfactory level.
I think we're doing good. The problem, my concern is how do we do and continue doing this when we become a bigger team? Because right now, self-care and master care and team care seems to be working fine when you're in a small community that keep themselves accountable and there are just natural concern of like a family. But how you keep expanding that when other people join is like what I would like to explore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How it's in for you, Annie or Anita, in your countries?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I mentioned, I'm still trying to, to really see what belongs under member care. I mean, definitely we haven't had a member care strategy or anything. This whole thing is very new to me. And it
mental and emotional health and physical health, because I actually dealt with a pretty serious medical issue earlier this year. And so for me personally, I think it's just an area that I hope our staff would be able to hear more about and be poured into in terms of really taking care of themselves and what does that actually mean. And for me, it's been a journey, and I would say, yeah, it's been a journey with me in the last 8 months, discovering that in terms of my relationship and identity in Christ, but also what does it mean to take care of myself. Because so Dennis, I was just sharing with them that I've had a pretty serious medical issue earlier this year, and so it's actually a big burden on my heart to really have Christian missionary people to understand what it means to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Assume if we focus on that part, it might change the member care situation right now in Taiwan. Yeah, so that would be my answer for this question.
It is definitely complex, and that's a large scope to be thinking about evaluating or thinking about. But yeah, that's a great start. So maybe something in with the new staff would be a place to start, or also maybe giving national team leaders the idea of what they're
yeah.
Yeah.
I think you bring up a good
Go ahead,
point,
Sandy.
Lillian. You bring up a good point that I think it's really true. It goes both ways, and when individuals begin to hear permission and encouragement to do self-care, it then impacts
situation, which I can understand. But I'm hoping this care questionnaire that I spoke about earlier, some of the questions in there is about marriage and about your personal life and your relationship with your close people, your family and your friends. And it's included in there. It's not just how you're doing physically and emotionally and spiritually, but also like anything else that you want to talk about that you have a problem with. And we don't necessarily, like member care, I don't even always know what's wrong. I just know this person needs counseling and I need to arrange it. So sometimes they're very closed up and they don't want to even let you know what's wrong. So it's not that we don't care, it's also kind of respecting that person's sense of trust and vulnerability and openness. So they will open up as much as they feel, but yeah, I don't think it's just not caring. I think it's just everybody's busy, and yeah, as long as it gets picked up, that's important. And I think that's the problem. It doesn't get picked up.
Yep.
Maybe once I consolidate some of the resources that we have, I can share them. We're still kind of learning what is transferable and what is kind of the type of thing that they only will do themselves.
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed a good discussion time. We're not going to share your discussions with the big group because of time. But I appreciate the function that Zoom has to be able to break up into these smaller groups, to be able to get personal and encourage one another and help build up one another through our discussions. So I trust your discussion group time was encouraging and helpful. The last couple of things we want to do is let's take a look at the resources that we have. And for this, I'm going to share my screen with you. So here's our, everybody see my screen? These are the resources that we have in session 1. The Foundations of Member Care article we've already seen. Here are a couple things that we're still in process of finding good resources to use. And this resource, as far as I know, has actually never been tried. But this is the Member Care Priority Assessment Tool. There's so many things on our plates. How do we prioritize which areas of member care we need to focus on now? So let me go ahead and click on this tool so that since you're seeing my screen anyway. It's a Google document that gives some instructions at the very beginning. It describes different elements of member care, from master care, and then there's the self-care team and team leader, and the movement care processes and movement care specialists. So for each of these, we have an element, a description of what that is, and then there's a priority assessment based on not just our LDHR priorities, but the global priorities, not global, national priorities. How would we rate each of these elements from top, high, medium, low, or 0? We have no time to think about this in the foreseeable future. And that's freeing. This is not something we're able to even think about now. And then evaluate how we're doing. The priority is from the national perspective. Evaluation is an honest evaluation. How is member care, how is LDHR doing in each of these areas? And you can rate from 1, little or no involvement or ineffective, to 5, very effective. Or you can also write NA, because there are some of these elements that may not be LDHR's responsibility, or perhaps our country stage is a lower stage where we don't have the capacity to deal with these issues. Rate these, and generally, this is not a science, but generally, something where you have a high priority and a low effectiveness, a low evaluation, may be the areas you'd want to focus on now. And then you can write your action steps. Once again, this has not been used to my knowledge, but theoretically, it looks like a good tool. Thoughts, questions? Then let's go on to the next one. The member care survey. This is designed as a national survey. I know it has been translated into Russian, and so I assume the Russians have used it. But let me just go ahead and click on it here and take you over here. It's done in a Google form. It's done as a survey. And you can actually copy it and use it yourself. But it has 18 short questions that deal with different aspects of our member care framework, that you can gather feedback from members in your organization, staff, maybe even some associate staff and volunteers, to find out how we're doing in the area of member care.
Is there a way that you're supposed to collect the results? And you
Yes,
just
the Google Forms collects the results. They can actually do a report for you with charts and graphs.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah. I mentioned another resource called the Member Care Card.
Yep.
And that is designed to be a card that can be printed two sides. So here, master, self, and team care would be on one side, and movement care would be on the other side. But something that you can use to share the framework of member care. And then finally, a great resource that can be used to assess your entire LDHR ministry, but really fits in well with member care is Cyrus Journey. Has anybody seen or used this? Thank you, Paul. Paul actually developed it. This is one of our hidden secrets of LDHR.
Oh.
It's an allegory. It walks you through 10 steps in a staff member's journey with our movement. And it's designed to be able to go through the scene, set the scene, set the stage, and then go through each of the steps, starting out, applying to join the movement. And with questions that your team can use to answer, how are we doing in caring for our staff in this area? How are we doing in facilitating this person being able to join our movement? So it's a general LDHR tool, but it's also can be very focused on the care aspects. Paul, do you have anything to add for Cyrus Journey?
Beautiful explanation, Dennis. Beautiful. Yeah. No. Yeah. Initially designed for LDHR leaders, but yeah, it can be used in a number of different contexts. The one that I'd love to see is have leadership teams discuss it a little bit more to push into the areas of member care as well as some of the infrastructure pieces around that as well.
If you have, like I said, we're just beginning to scratch the surface, and we started looking through what do we already have that may be able to be used for member care. If you have anything that you feel can help with the whole general idea of what is member care, how do we evaluate our member care, how do we communicate member care, please post that on the Facebook community. We are very eager to increase our list of resources so that we can have a bigger toolbox to help with the member care. Okay?
Okay.
Go ahead and take a look at some of these resources, and if you notice our assignments really include some of the resources that you can use on your own. My wife has already changed the link for the member care survey, so you should have. Let's go ahead and try that.
You have to refresh.
So I can refresh. Is it? Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So this is the proper link. It has the questions, and then you can also view the responses, which there are no responses yet. If you want to view the survey, you go in a preview what the survey will look like. How do I get back out of here? Help. There. And then in order to copy it, you go here, and then you can make a copy. Make a copy, and then you can edit the questions and use it for your own purposes. So feel free to edit this and change it in a way that will be more helpful for you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to our group. Somebody has posted something in a chat. Okay, evaluate light care section can also help. Yes, thank you, Hangrzal. Actually, if you notice, the member care priority tool was copied from the evaluate light tool, the format. Okay, friends, the final thing that I want to just remind you of is that there is homework. So if you'll go over to your member care handbook on page 6, our homework is to summarize and explain the member care framework to somebody else, to use the member care priority assessment tool and assess your member care effectiveness with your team, and then to do a word study on care in the New Testament. And you might want to consider other synonyms for care as well to do a word study. And I actually did this, and it was very encouraging. We'll be sharing some of these during the session next time, but for other ones, I'd encourage you to post your findings, things that encouraged you in our Facebook site. I'm going to send you the email addresses for people in your group so that you can continue to interact with people in your groups throughout the week through email and share your progress or encouragement with one another. We have 2 minutes left. Any questions or thoughts before we close?
So Dennis, all this, just now what you have showed us, the document, is it going to be available in the Google Drive?
They are in Google Drive. You can actually
I can access it.
Click edit and download them as a Word document or a PDF document or something and use.
Okay.
I encourage you to use, if you want to adjust it for your own country's priorities and purposes, feel free to adapt it for your own needs.
Okay. Yeah.
Good question. Thanks. Anything else? I am very pleased with how technology has worked this morning, afternoon, and evening. And I hope you guys enjoyed the time. We're going to start, we looked at the framework today. Beginning next week, we're going to start putting some meat on the bones. We're going to start building the building around the framework. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't think we have all the answers, but hopefully we'll come away with more practical tools and resources and methods to help our member care processes. Mike, could I ask you to close our time in prayer?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thanks.
Father, I first of all just my heart is overflowing with gratitude to those who have worked so hard to put these materials and resources in this class together. I know they were motivated through from you wanting to care for us as member care practitioners, and I just thank you that in this role that we get to see you work and see you glorified in unique ways, and ask that your spirit would empower us and guide us as we try to incorporate the things that we're learning into our own roles and our own ministries. Pray that you would even give us insights going forward for how we can use these great resources to help others understand better what member care is and how they can take the next steps toward expanding our capacity and ability to care well for all of our staff. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Hey, thanks, y'all. We'll see you next week. And if you have any questions, the Facebook group is there. You can email me, and I will give you some updates also to prepare for our next time.